Star Wars Outlaws has been out for a little while now, and if I'm being completely honest, I like it. It feels so odd to like something this much when everyone else doesn't. So, I want to talk about it. Spoilers ahead. You've been warned. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and let's get into the video. First things first, I'm not here to defend the game as it were. I'm just here to talk about what it was like for me to play it and why I liked it so much despite its many and deep flaws. Sure, the game is broken, messy, and buggy in spots, but technical limitations like bad AI and stilted animations are far from this game's biggest problem. The biggest issue this game has is its lack of tonal focus. In other words, the game is not quite sure exactly what it wants to be. The opening is very strong, setting the stage for the main character Kay having a death mark on her, where everyone should theoretically be trying to kill her. You would think that this would lead to inherent tension out in the open world, but most of the time the open world of this game is big, empty, and not really dangerous, unless you specifically choose to venture into an outpost owned by a hostile faction. In which case, it was absolutely shoot on sight, a non-permissive environment. I found the faction system to be, at the same time, one of the best and most undercooked aspects of the game. The faction system was something that Ubisoft was pushing hard during the marketing campaign, implying that you would have to pick a side and picking sides would have consequences. While the reputation and faction systems are intriguing, the game doesn't seem to fully commit to them. Like I said, the game is not tonally focused. There was a number of times I got caught in a Crimson Dawn stealth area, knocking people out. That's right, punching them in the head. And what did they do to me? All they did was escort me out, and I was able to just walk right into the same area a few minutes later. I would have expected something a little bit more punishing, a little bit more consequential. Something like a secondary bounty being placed on my head. Something to reflect my bad deeds within their compound. And even so, the faction reputation rewards weren't that great. Just a few cosmetics, some rare items, and some credits. But it wasn't really anything novel or something that I couldn't find anywhere else. It would have been more fun and more interesting if the faction rewards and faction consequences were more permanent, something bigger, something a lot more impactful. There were faction-exclusive missions with bigger rewards based on better reputation, but a larger story mission or even optional side quests would have been interesting if you were either on good terms with a faction or on incredibly bad terms with a faction. I think permanent death marks, or at least long-term death marks with factions, where they hunt you everywhere no matter where you go, would be interesting, with the option to complete a special complex mission to get your mark removed. Of course, there are faction-specific missions that require an excellent reputation in order to access, but all of these missions just boil down to the same kind of smuggling or fetch quests. Nothing feels unique or memorable. At least what I'm proposing would bring consequences to the game. This lack of consequences makes the game less interesting in my opinion. I know I started this video by saying that I really like the game, and I do, so I want to finally tell you why I like this game so much. This game shines in its more focused, linear, and narrative moments. There are a handful of times in the game where the open world is taken away from the player, and I think this is where the game really excels and shines. Those linear sequences do lend themselves to a very interesting, if not cliched, story. A story told through the actions of three specific characters. Kay Vess, a street kid turned outlaw, Nyx, her little buddy, and the MVP of this game in my opinion, ND5, a reclaimed BX commando unit from the Clone Wars era. The tenuous relationships between these characters gave rise to themes of belonging, purpose, and family that I didn't think I would find here. And this is one of the few areas of the game in which things are tonally focused and consistent. There's a story arc about midway through the game where Kay has to sneak through Jabba's palace to reclaim Nyx, but you have to do so without Nyx, and by this point in the game, I had become so dependent on Nyx for stealth awareness and distractions that it felt different. The game was more difficult. I really felt as though I was losing a partner in crime and it was vital to get him back. The gameplay had changed, something that was cohesively feeding into the narrative. I could no longer rely on Nix to steal keycards or distract guards for me. I had to do it myself. Things felt dire and consequential, memorable, where all of the open world just felt big, bland, and empty. I wish there were more linear sections like this, like the time when Kay and her friends have to sneak through an abandoned CIS droid factory in order to find ND5 a new power source. The droid factory itself is dark, dingy, dirty, and broken, almost a character unto itself. Parts of it felt like it was straight out of a horror game. I was so afraid that the battle droids were going to wake up and start shooting. The sequence also does a lot to establish ND5 as a machine, an unreliable, broken, flaky machine that's deadly, calculating, but at the same time barely holding together. Even he himself acknowledges this. This sequence also is foreshadowing for the very end of the game, in which ND5 becomes the final boss, in a truly harrowing and scary sequence that feels like it's straight out of a Terminator movie. A fight that makes for a very climactic and satisfying end to the game. If there was one takeaway I had after finishing Star Wars Outlaws, is that there is fun to be had, and there is a good story underneath all the tedium. The game just can't get out of its own way. Star Wars Outlaws feels like such wasted potential. It makes me think fondly back on Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, games in which the story was the priority. There were side quests and open sandbox maps, but most of it served the purpose of pushing you to the more focused story, and that was rewarding. I think the pacing of Star Wars Outlaws suffers greatly due to its unnecessary open world and lackluster side quests, but I genuinely love and enjoy the story that this game is trying to tell. But unfortunately, the story falls victim to the Ubisoft open world template. Maybe if there's a sequel, we can hope for a more focused, refined, and linear experience. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to my ramblings, I appreciate it. If you liked or hated the game, tell me why in the comments, I really want to know. And don't forget to like, dislike, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.